Peace to you. My name is Reverend Dr. Masia Evans, and I welcome you to First United Methodist Church, here in the heart of bustling Midtown Sacramento. We are an inclusive community that values justice and always seeks to practice love first. I pray that this message will be meaningful to you. Let us pray. Dear God, in these brief moments, I pray that you will open our hearts so that we may receive that which you have for us to receive. And as always, may the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, who is both our rock and redeemer. Amen. So last week we explored this almost clandestine cloak and dagger scene featuring Jesus and one of the leaders from the rival sect, the Pharisees, named Nicodemus. And as you can remember, I kind of called him Nico because in my mind, that's what Jesus called him, Nico. And they talked about how he needs to be born of spirit and demonstrated that not only will God meet us in our night spaces, but alert us to that something that Phil Collins once sung about that is coming in the air tonight, that comes and goes as it wills, that can meet us in our dark moments and empower us to keep on keeping on. This week we have another encounter. It happens not in a city in Judea, not in the midnight hour. In fact, the setting could not have been more opposite. It happens in a place called Samaria, out in the open, and presumably around about the noontime hour. For context, a type of post-colonial kind of lens can help us understand the animosity between these two groups, the Jews and the Samaritans. Though they are closely related, they had diverged over the centuries across multiple conquests, including the Assyrians and the Babylonians and now the Romans. There developed ethnic and religious and political differences resulting in deep historical and mutual hostility. For instance, on the religious tip, the Samaritans followed the Torah, but they held that they had the holy mountain that they went to, not going to Jerusalem. So they had different sacred centers. This shows up in the text that was just read. Jesus and Jews from the north had to cross through Samaria to get to Jerusalem. That was not well advised. So often they went east of the river into the modern day Jordan to avoid getting into any altercations along the way. They really went at great lengths to avoid each other. This beef is even documented historically, and in part is responsible for Pilate to being appointed as governor in that region to kind of quell inter-ethnic violence. To this day, area is contested land. In fact, the same year that Bill Coolidge became mayor here in Sacramento, in 1948, the State of Israel was formed and all the upheaval that surrounded that event. Ancient area is now in the West Bank, meaning the west side of the Jordan River, and it's found in Palestine. And the well where this story takes place is a modern-day city of Nablus, which you see the city street there on the screen. The point, the context of contestation was present in the reading, still applies today. And even though usage of the word Samaria is a loaded term for reasons that I won't get into at this time. But let's just look at the heart of what happened here. This encounter begins with social boundary crossing, typical of Jesus in all of the Gospels. And he asked this Samaritan woman for a drink. She is surprised that he is interacting with a Samaritan. And quite later, when the disciples approach the scene, they are particularly concerned about the fact that he's talking to a woman. This encounter between the two can be read in three movements. The first movement is all about the water, right? And Jesus' thirst and the living water, all that. The second movement is this conversation, this little shady conversation about the woman's private life, right? Which is kind of when the conversation turns. Won't get into that. And the third movement is this conversation about worshiping in spirit and truth. They get into this theological conversation, which I love. In the whole, the passage is about Jesus overcoming exclusiveness and building community through inclusiveness. And it's also about the boldness and I would say intelligence of this Samaritan woman who, through courageous conversations, I believed pushed Jesus and also initiated change in her community. Story featuring the Samaritan woman is important because I could not help but think of how her witness is so important today, both her and Jesus, in modeling boundary-crossing boldness in the name of making community. The need for this is obvious as we see war of choice raging in Iran. There's so many things about that is troubling. We just saw soldiers come back into Dover and all of that and all the death that is happening. There's so much that is infuriating about this. But as I thought about this unnamed Samaritan woman, I thought of the unnamed girls who would never grow into womanhood because their school was bombed, most likely from us. And Jesus and the Samaritan woman's boundary-crossing boldness is important to lift up, especially when there's a type of Christianity being practiced and affirmed, even in the Oval Office, that deifies power and nationalism and division, with reports saying that the language of a holy war is being used by our leaders in justification of almost unchecked, crusader-like executive power. Jesus and the Samaritan woman's boundary-crossing boldness reminds us, especially within this context, of the need now then to draw from the well of living waters, the type that Jesus spoke of. Because when dealing with all the challenges that we are facing, both around the globe or just even in our personal lives, the only way that we will be sustained is by drawing living waters, waters that connects us to God's Spirit instead of driving us to be mired in the muck of this world. This, I believe, in part, is the invitation in this text, to draw upon living waters so that we can stay connected in spirit. Now, you've heard enough from me. So at this time, I want to invite two women forward who reflect the boldness of Belle Coolidge and Sahir Hamad and Shireen Nashat, and yes, this unnamed Samaritan woman. I asked them to speak on the spiritual practices that sustain them like living waters. So let us show our appreciation in advance as they come forward, both Amy Price and Kawami Evans.
Good morning, church. My husband told me at home, make sure it is 3 minutes or less. When I reflect on the story of the woman in the well in the Gospel of John, I am reminded that we all come to the well carrying something. We come with questions, with weariness, with stories that others may not fully understand. And yet at the well, she encountered something deeper than what she was expecting. She came for water, but she received living water, sustenance for her life and for her spirit. That story invites me to ask myself, Kawami, how do you return to the well, and how do you draw on the living waters that God continues to offer? For me, one way is through sisterhood. I have been blessed because I have 2 biological sisters. And also, I have a number of incredible women in my life. God places women in my life who can help hold me when I am tired, who inspire me when I feel uncertain, and who love me enough to give me hard feedback when I need to hear it. Women who will pray for me, stand beside me, and remind me of the God within me when I sometimes forget. That kind of sisterhood is a wellspring. Through those relationships, I feel God's care, wisdom, and encouragement flowing through me and through them. Another way I draw from the living water is by stepping away from the noise of the world. We live in a time of constant movement, notifications, responsibilities, expectations, and so forth. But sometimes the well is found in the stillness, quiet moments where I can sit still, breathe, and listen. In that quiet, I can hear God more clearly than I can feel, and I can feel God's presence reminding me that I'm not alone and that I'm sustained by something far greater than myself. Service is another place where I find the well. When I give my time, when I share my resources, when I offer encouragement, love, or simply connection with someone who needs it, I realize that the living water flows both ways. I am blessed by them, and they are blessed by me. As we pour into each other's lives, God continues to pour into us. Service becomes a sacred exchange for me. And finally, I try to move through the world with the awareness that I am, in some circles, like with my nieces and nephews, I'm an elder. And in some spaces and in other spaces, I'm also an ancestor in training. The choices I make, the love I show, the wisdom I share, the ways I lift others, all of it matters beyond this moment. I want the legacy of my life to be one that helped someone find their way to the well. So when I think about the woman at the well, I don't just see a story from long ago, I see an invitation to keep returning to the places where God's living water flows, through community, through quiet reflection, through service, and through the responsibility of how we show up in this world. Because when we draw from the living water, we are not only sustained, we become part of the well for someone else all across the world. Thank you.
Hello, church. When Marcia asked me to talk to you about spiritual practices that have been like living waters to me, I thought of three things right away: music, connection with other people, and prayer. I am not a musician, but I am a big-time music liker. And I do have the experience of listening to live music as being a very spiritual experience. Now, my favorite type of music, I like all music, but my very favorite is jazz. My husband, Danny Price, his favorite music is the great NorCal jam band, the Grateful Dead. So, where did jazz and the Grateful Dead overlap? The jam, right? The long, extended jam among the musicians. They're creating a new and unique expression from an existing composition. And I feel God present in the jam as the creation by artists and the appreciation by the audience happens simultaneously. Not every art is experienced that way. Whether sharing music speaks to our joy, sadness, protest, or peace, it creates connection with the others that you are sharing the experience with. Now, connection with others is very important to me, and a primary way I experience this is personal conversations. And if I have had a personal conversation with you ever in the time we've known each other, know that I'm very grateful for that. And if I haven't, know that I am looking forward to it. In the church, I experience personal connection in classes, in small groups, and even in committee work. So if someone asks you to serve on a committee, just be open to the unexpected things that might come from that. Your church family are the people who do the work with you. They celebrate and grieve with you. They notice when you grow, and they hold you accountable when you stumble. Importantly, they pray for you. My experience of prayer is that it's my focused attention on God. Sometimes I offer prayer in words, and sometimes I receive something in stillness that comes as kind of an image. I don't know if you've had this experience. I try to spend some of my prayer time in stillness, listening or just experiencing God's presence. I share the names of people that I've committed to pray for. If I've ever told you you're on my 6:15 list, that means you look at your clock at 6:15 a.m. and know that I am holding you in prayer right then. I might say something like, please help her find peace. Please help him be aware how much he is loved. Sometimes it's a lot simpler than that. Sometimes it's just, ow. Oh, wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I recently had a synthesis of these 3 types of living waters, music, connection, and prayer, that was kind of an unexpected love first moment. Danny and I were out listening to music, as we often are, and at the end of the first set, the lead singer walked past us and we hollered out, "Good set, man." And he stopped and turned and walked toward me, and I don't know him personally. And he said, "Thanks, it's not good. It's not good. I don't feel good. I'm not finding my groove." And I started to say, "Oh, I didn't notice that." And he said, "My family has had a terrible loss today. And in respect of his privacy, I won't tell that with you, but it's something that you would never want to go through." And I thought maybe he kept this gig out of obligation when the rest of us would be maybe huddled in the dark with the people we love. Or maybe he expected to find comfort in his music, but he wasn't finding it. And I could see the pain on his face, and I said, "I'm so sorry." And it came to me to say, "Feel us holding you up." Now, I didn't have permission on behalf of anybody else there to include them in the "feel us holding you up." But I thought of the times when I have felt God holding me up, or felt people praying for me or who loved me as holding me up. And it's actually an image that has come to me during my prayer time, literally people holding me up. And this was a prayer I said out loud in front of the person I was praying for. Well, they did have a great second set. And as it ended, we were walking out, and I passed him, and I just looked at him and said, "Take care," because I didn't want to say, "Great set, man," knowing what he had gone through that day. And he motioned me over. And so I came over and I said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be intrusive." And he said, "No, thank you." And he put his arms around me and he said, "I needed your mojo." So I don't know that I've ever thought of prayer and mojo as being the same, but he did. So it wasn't until I was preparing this to say to you today that I realized all those living waters, the music and the connection, the prayer, that mine that are meaningful to me and yours that are meaningful to you are God giving us what we need to be love first.
Thank you for watching. To get further connected, you can always join us in person at one of our weekly worship services, which meets every Sunday at 10 a.m. here at 2100 J Street, Midtown, Sacramento. Or for more information, you can click on one of the provided links, which is also posted in the description. Thank you for being a part of this community. And always remember, put love first. Peace.